and welcome to the Chat Lounge. I'm Tuyun. In this episode of our special series, My Expat Life in Rural China, we meet Morgan Jones and Daniel Willers from the United States. In fact, I'm sitting down in a greenhouse of their farm called Original in Xining, the provincial capital of Qinghai province in northwest China, for a chat about their lives in pursuing organic agriculture in the country. Thank you for hosting us, Morgan and Daniel,
Yeah, thank you. It's good. Glad to have you guys here.
Fun.
and
Yeah.
welcome to the show. So, first of all, would you please introduce yourselves a little bit? What's your role in the company? What were you up to before coming to China? And what brought you to China in the first place? Shall we start with Daniel, please?
Yeah, so my name is Daniel Willers. I'm originally from the southeastern United States, but ever since I was a teenager, I got a chance to go to the western U.S., to the Rocky Mountains. And the high altitude, beautiful mountain scenery really captured my heart at that young age. And yeah, so I was able to work in a career in landscape architecture for a few years. And then my wife and I learned about Qinghai, learned about these places in the world that have these wonderful mountains and high elevation areas, and decided that we would love to have a chance to raise our kids in another country, another culture, and just really enjoy experiencing the world for ourselves. And so in the end, after a process of several years, we found ourselves here in Xining and joined this company in 2018 actually.
Hmm. Morgan, I understand you came earlier to China earlier than Daniel.
Yeah, my family and I came in 2009, moved here to Qinghai. So I'm originally from California, a large agricultural state in the United States. And I've been involved in agriculture my entire life. Grew up in it, studied it, was involved in it before coming here. But the agriculture industry is very developed in the U.S. And so I was interested in more of the opportunity in an emerging agricultural industry. And that is what initially led us to China. Yeah, so we're here with our family, my family, my four kids here in Xining.
Like you just mentioned, agriculture in the States is very developed. So there are also many other countries who's very good at good at agriculture, such as Argentina and Brazil, which are closer to your home country, right? So why? I believe your friends and family also asked you the same question. Why did you choose China then?
You know, you can't get any higher in the world than the Qinghai Tibetan Plateau.
But that's more difficult
And
for agriculture.
you know, that's just one of the personal passions of mine. And yeah, it was a lot of options. You know, the world's a big place. Where do you go? But one thing led to another, and here we are.
Right. Like it.
Well, in being involved in agriculture in California, we grow a lot of products for export to China. A lot of fruits, a lot of nuts. California, we grow, a huge portion of the world's pistachios, and China buys almost all of them. So we always saw China as an important market for agriculture in California, but it's not so easy to grow fresh produce and ship to China. So seeing an opportunity to be involved in fruit and vegetable production in China was interesting. Something different than, having having gone into agriculture in California. It's a pretty determined career path. You kind of know what it's going to look like. But here, there's a lot of opportunities, very emerging market, and yeah, I think having the opportunity to raise my kids overseas, giving them the opportunity to learn Chinese, to speak it fluently, is just a great, you know, opportunity to really enlarge their worldview. So why not China? Yeah.
Yeah, as you said, yes, China is a big country of agriculture, and there are many large agricultural provinces in China. Why did you choose Qinghai, where the agriculture or cultivation industry is less developed? Why don't you choose some place closer to the first tier cities like Beijing, Shanghai, with stronger consumption power? Haven't you considered this will bring more uncertainty to your product sales? Uh, maybe working.
It's a good question. One we think about often, one we get asked often. I think before moving to Qinghai, I had the opportunity to visit many different places in China, all the big cities, the main agricultural areas, um, and being from a rural background, those big cities are just not really the lifestyle that I'm used to or that I want. And there's just something quite unique about Qinghai, the mountains, the ethnic diversity, the the beautiful weather in the summers. The summers here, um, is really the best place in China. Um, and like you said, there's other areas that already have a developed agricultural industry in China. But seeing the opportunity here that nobody's doing much with fruit and vegetable production here. So yeah, we saw an opportunity. We liked the place. It's a nice place to live. So
Yeah, has the location of Qinghai has any problems for, especially for Daniel, to do the marketing with?
Yeah, I mean, for organic products, I would say that we're still a bit ahead of the market in Shanghai here. It's kind of something that we're developing as our farm is developing, kind of creating a market for our products. And so there are definitely, some challenges involved with that. Um, but actually, interestingly enough, that we just came out of the pandemic the past few years, and we found that as people were more concerned about their health, there's became more and more interest in the local consumers about having this organic, fresh produce straight from farm to their table. So it's kind of yeah, something we talk about. We want to like increase our production, increase our customers, and keep it balanced as we slowly grow.
And Daniel, how did you manage to solve the problem?
Solve the problem.
solve the problem.
It's never been solved.
One of the things you learn quickly about agriculture, but really anything in life, is that there will always be challenges.
Mm.
And so it's not that we're trying to get rid of challenges, but how do you meet those challenges? And I think it really all starts with our production, which all starts with our soil. We'll talk about that in a bit, maybe. But as the local customers become more health conscious, they're more interested in our product. As they get a chance to try our fruits and vegetables, they say, "Wow, this is so fresh, so tasty. Um, it's way better than anything we could get in the market." And so it just kind of is a process that happens over time. Another thing about agriculture is, in the States we talk sometimes about this thing, microwave culture. We just want everything instantly.
Right.
And in agriculture, that's great if you use chemical fertilizers and pesticides. It can be a lot faster. But when you're doing stuff organically, it can sometimes be a longer process. And so we're just aware of that. And so it's not something that we have to solve immediately, but as our farm grows, our customers grow, and we can kind of grow together.
But I mean, your customers or clients, are they limited to Qinghai or Xining to the city, or do you have any clients like far in in the east or east coast or northern part of the country, like Beijing, Shanghai?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we really like about what we're doing is the opportunity to provide locally grown fresh produce to our customers. And so I would say the majority of our customers are here local in the city. But we do have a few around the country that one way or another they heard about us and they really love our product. And so we've shipped stuff to Shanghai, to Guangzhou, to Chengdu. We do have a few in Lanzhou, which is about 3 hours drive away or so. Um, but really, our focus is on our local market, and then if people outside of that are interested, we'll offer them our products as well.
Morgan, what are your farm products and how much have you invested in this farm so far?
We grow 30 to 40 different types of fresh produce. That's the main focus. Mainly vegetables, though we do grow strawberries. We can grow those year round, and then we grow some fruit products in the summer. But yeah, vegetable production is the main one. We also sell some kind of specialty Qinghai products, local honey, as well as quinoa, which is an exciting crop that is starting to be produced here in Qinghai. So we sell those. Um, and then we also have started a small kind of a takeout style restaurant. And with that, we're able to use some of our farm products that we can't sell fresh, but we can dry them or we can, do some processing of them and then sell some additional products that way. Anything to add? He's more the sales guy.
Investment, how
Yeah.
much have you
Oh,
invested?
yeah, the investment, 100,000 US dollars is the registered capital of our company. And then we've invested a lot of hard work,
Yeah,
a lot of sweat.
I think the term is sweat equity is
Sweat.
What?
quite a significant investment.
That's true. But then to Daniel again, who are your main clients and how many clients do you have now and what percentage of them are loyal customers?
We have every week 40 to 50 orders. And of those 40 to 50 orders, I would say probably 80% are loyal customers. And then the other 20% kind of varies from week to week. But we definitely have people that order every week or even order twice a week. We also are starting to provide to a few restaurants, coffee shops, bakeries, different things like that. We grow some Western herbs, and so something like rosemary or basil or whatever. Uh, these are things that are really hard to find outside of our farm. And so some of these local bakeries enjoy using these unique seasonings and flavors in their products.
And of those loyal customers, what kind of veggies are there maybe among their favorite?
Mm. I think everybody has their own favorite,
Okay.
but what's a really popular product we sell is our salad mix. So we have several different varieties of leafy greens. Um, a lot of people enjoy carrots,
Carrots are
tomatoes.
so-
When tomatoes are in season, they're really popular as well.
Mm. And I'm asking the next question on behalf of one of our cameramen, Li Xiaohai there. His family is running a family farm of 53 hectares, basically some 40 times the size of your farm. So after seeing what you've been working on and your yields, he couldn't help but ask, um, is the revenue from your farm enough to support the expenses of two families of yours and cover the salaries of your employees? then what would be your answer to him?
Short answer, not yet. As I mentioned before, it's a process, and um, we would say normally from 3 to 7 years before we expect to see the farm producing at its optimum level. And so I would say because of the past 3 years and different factors, you could say we're maybe 2 to 3 years into that process, realistically. Um, and so it's another one of those things that we knew getting into this. It's just going to take a bit more time. And so we're okay with that. And in the meantime, we have resources available to keep things going. But yeah, the other thing I think our farm is really designed, and maybe Morgan, you can speak to this a little more, but as a small farm model, that would be for 1 or 2 local families. Yeah.
Yeah, the size of this farm is really more ideal to support 2 or 3 families, employees. But there's a lot of other things our company does that requires more people. So, talking about creating a market here. So, it's almost like we have a whole marketing division, whereas that is unique to a farm. Typically, like in California, in the states where I'm from, a farm will grow the produce. Then there's a whole nother business that does the marketing, the packing, the shipping, all of that, where we're doing that all within our business. And then on the other side, we're almost like a whole research and development division as well, where we're researching new crops, new varieties that we think will work in this climate. So this farm here is kind of the model that we're developing to try and figure out all of that. What are the crops you grow? Um, how do you do the marketing? How do you do the sales, the deliveries? So that then we can take that model and people can learn from it and then reproduce it in other places. So yeah, this small farm here is not enough to completely sustain this company. Yeah.
But yeah, there's also the technology,
Right.
equipment,
Designing of greenhouses.
and then consulting services. So we have a variety of sort of revenue streams that we're developing because the goal of this location itself is more of a training and demonstration location that then can provide these sorts of services to people all over the world, really.
And you're saying you're using it as a demonstration example to local farmers. You want them to
Yeah,
join in as well?
yeah, local farmers, people that are interested in agriculture around the country, uh, around Southeast Asia. We're really um, excited about the potential. We kind of say if you can do it here, then you can do it anywhere because there are some unique challenges here.
Now, how's the growth of your business come in line with your expectations so far?
Um, I think in my experience, every business that I've observed, every business owner I've talked to, they're a little more optimistic when they start than reality.
Yeah.
Then you get into it and you see the challenges. Understanding that agriculture is a long-term business, I think we were not surprised with how it's developed, though the last 3 years for every business, has been very challenging. And so that really set us back where, we are in this process of really improving the soil and developing a market. And this last 3 years really slowed down that process. But I don't think we're disappointed or really were expecting it to be way different than what it is now. I think we both went into this knowing that this is not a fast process.
Daniel, disappointment is not the same as satisfaction. Are you satisfied?
As long as we continue to have progress, I'm satisfied, and I see that. Even in spite of the challenges of the past few years, every year I feel like things are getting better and improving. Our products improving, our markets improving, and so if we can continue progress, then that's what we will focus on. Yeah.
Then, Morgan, why did you choose organic farming? How does it differ from a conventional
Yeah, that's a good question. I did not, my background is not organic farming.
farm?
I, uh, grew up and was trained in more conventional farming where, you take a soil test, you see what nutrients are lacking in that soil, you develop a fertilizer plan to how to address that. You scout your crops to find out what insects, disease there are. You apply a chemical for that. So that's my background, not organic farming. When we first started, the goal was not organic farming, but the customers just kept saying it's organic. And so then we'd have to correct them. We're not organic, but it's safe, healthy. But they just kept saying that.
Why would they believe it's organic? Because of you?
Yeah, maybe because we're foreigners, they figured. I don't really know.
Yeah, we would say like safe, healthy produce
Right.
because we were using these inputs as little as possible, you know. So in China, there's actually a category called green food.
Mm.
It's not organic, but it uses less chemicals. So we're probably more in that green food category, I would say, originally.
Yeah, so maybe our marketing with safe, healthy, fresh in the customer's mind, they say, "Oh, organic." Um, so after a while, we just kind of looked at each other and decided maybe we should just do organic. Um, and also another way to differentiate ourselves, our product, from everything on the local market. So we decided to do it, and then we had to really learn what that means, how to do it, because it really is a different approach where it really starts with the soil. So you really have to look at the biology in the soil rather than the chemistry. So it's approaching it from a different perspective. And then once we realized that, then we realized, oh, okay, compost production is very necessary. So we got into it doing organic before we had the compost production. And then we realized, you know, most people doing this style of agriculture around the world, um, they don't necessarily make their own compost. They'll buy it from a compost maker. But we started looking at what was available locally and came to the conclusion that we were going to have to start the compost production ourselves. So then that was a whole nother learning process of how to do that, getting the equipment, learning the process. So as far as difference, the main difference would be approaching it from a biology perspective, building the soil biology, um, introducing and facilitating the microorganisms in the soil that then make the nutrients available to the plants. Whereas conventional farming is using chemical inputs to provide nutrients to the plants and then using chemicals to deal with problems that you find, whether they're disease or insects.
Right. How do you deal with this insects?
Yeah, so I mean, any kind of farming, your biggest questions are soil fertility,
Yes.
disease pressure, insect pressure.
Mm.
So those aren't different in organic farming. Same
Might add
challenges.
weather to that too.
Weather,
Right.
obviously.
Give us like a small example. How would you kill the insects?
Yeah, so the insects would be, and I think from what I know about other organic farmers, that's the biggest challenge is the insects because there's just not good solutions for it. There are some organic sprays you can use, but they are not as effective as chemical pesticides. So it really only works on contact. So if you're able to spray the insect, then it will work. But what we found was, anytime you spray something that's designed to kill insects, it kills the harmful insects, but it also kills the beneficial insects. Um, and so you're not really, it's not really a long-term solution to the problem. So there's a plant-derived spray that we use to spray insects. We do use that if we have to, but our approach is more to create a balanced ecosystem. So we're not trying to get rid of all the insects because we want the beneficial ones. We want the beneficial ones to control the harmful ones. So we do things like we plant a lot of flowering things that attract beneficial insects and also create a habitat for them to live. Um, Another thing we do is we use pheromone traps. So it puts out a scent that attracts the male species of the harmful insect. And then the idea is if we catch all the males, then they can't reproduce. So it's not a quick fix. It takes time for that. So those are some of the strategies we use.
Right. From what you've just described, it sounds very familiar to me. It feels like you're going back to,
Hmm.
the traditional agricultural method that has been practiced in China for several thousand years before the country started turning to chemical technologies in the 1980s for higher yields. Is that so, or do you like introduce anything more advanced to your methods?
I think a lot of these practices, you're right. It sounds like how farmers farmed generations ago. And that's true not just in China, but other countries I've traveled to in Asia and in America as well. So the principles and the practices are quite similar. I think the difference now is we understand more of the science of why we're doing that. We understand now a lot more about soil biology, what's happening in the soil with fungi and bacteria. Um, but it's true, the practices that farmers used generations ago, were building that soil biology, keeping animals on the land, using the plant waste. Um, but I think now we understand more of the science of it. So we're able to maybe be um, a little more specific about the practices we do. Um, but yeah, it is quite interesting. It's really going back to the way people used to farm.
Right. Then what's your biggest challenge in your daily work here? Because you are responsible for different things or uh, with your company. So Daniel, what's your biggest challenge?
Yeah, so I do a lot of the more administrative stuff in the company, dealing with the legal compliance issues, looking at potential for future certifications, looking at sales and marketing. Um, I did a lot of work to put together our online sales platform, different things like that. And so, honestly, I think it's a generational thing for me,
Mm.
in that, I was born in 1980, and uh, when I was a kid, we didn't have computers and smartphones and all these things. Video was the VCR tapes and stuff. Um, and so staying up with the sort of short video and all the different things that are the latest and greatest technology for marketing, I think it honestly is a bit challenging for me. I can do it, but maybe I'm a little slow at it.
Yeah, I think a slow pace is good for today, especially for contemporary life here in China, where everything seems a little bit too fast.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Morgan's biggest challenge you've encountered?
I think for me, the biggest challenge I face, maybe due to my personality and maybe some cultural differences. You know, I like to have a plan. You know, the beginning of the week, I know what work needs to get done on what day. Um, and oftentimes the culture here just does not operate like that.
Right.
And so I will, on a regular basis, somebody will just show up and they want, you know, to have a meeting or they want to, you know, spend time or talk about something. And that's my biggest challenge, you know, because I had a plan.
Follow the strict like schedule, but they
Yeah,
everything
yeah,
happens to randomly.
randomly, and you know, and it frustrates me that you know people don't contact you know me ahead of time and say set a time. So that is my biggest frustration. I've lived here long enough to know that's going to happen, and so I should be able to anticipate that and handle that better, but I don't always do it.
So, has either of you ever hesitated and felt it was too frustrated for you and maybe want to quit?
I won't say that I've ever wanted to quit, but there's definitely been days that I've wanted to forget about all this organic stuff and just, spray a bunch of pesticides and zap the bugs.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but that's not what we're doing, and so you can't do that. It's not really an option. It's maybe a dream or something, but you just know you've got to keep going through the challenge and get to the other side of it.
Yeah, for me, yeah, I would agree. I don't think there's been times where I've wanted to quit. Um, you know, this is what I do. You know, growing fruits and vegetables is what I do. There have been times where I've thought that maybe this would be easier in a different place. Um, maybe you should go somewhere else. But then you look back at, you know, what you put into it, and it's not so easy to just say, oh, stop, go somewhere else, because then you just have to start over, start the process over. So definitely been frustrations, but nothing that makes us think we want to just quit. Yeah.
Even this high altitude of Qinghai, like it was about like 2,200 kilometers above sea rate. It's not so conducive to fogs. Even this one doesn't like sway you any
I
a little
think
bit.
I think we've learned to adapt a little more to the climate. It's really the winters that make things so challenging. The long, cold winters with very short days.
Yeah.
And I think some of our frustrations early on was we were really trying to grow crops that were not conducive to that climate.
What about the American cherries you talked to us like days ago?
Yeah, so one of, you know, going back to this idea of the research and development side of the farm, one of the things we introduced a few years ago, there was a lot of interest in Qinghai about uh, cherries, growing cherries in Qinghai. So we planted them in a few different locations, but that's a very long-term process. You know, the first question is, will the cherries grow? So yeah, the trees grew. They grew and established well, but then you get to the point where you want them to start, you know, producing fruit. And so then you have the pollination challenges. And so, you know, then that, you know, took a couple of years and that's challenging because you only have one chance a year. It's not like you just plant another crop and try again. So we spent then a couple of years trying to figure out the pollination part of it. And then after 5 years, we realized, okay, this climate here where we are is not conducive to cherry production. Now, fortunately, we planted them in another part of Qinghai, and we realized that that climate is conducive, and we get good cherry production there. Um, but yeah, that's frustrating. That's frustrating to spend that many years to find out it doesn't work. But again, I think, we spent a lot of winters trying to figure out how to grow tomatoes over winter and got quite frustrated, with the challenges of that. We haven't given up. We still try different things, but we don't spend so much of our time and energy trying to grow a crop in the winter that really needs to be grown in the summer. So we've adjusted our crop planning a bit to focus more on winter crops in the winter, which is what farmers should be doing everywhere. But um, with the greenhouses, it gives us a little more flexibility. So I think adjusting expectations has helped some with that, where we're still trying to figure these things out, um, but not. It doesn't become a major focus of what we're doing.
That sounds a very, philosophical. When things don't meet your expectation, just make some adjustment or lower
Maybe that's what
expectation.
we need to do, adjust expectations.
Yeah.
All right, we turn to something more general about this country. So, having been in China for more than a decade, what would be the biggest change what's the biggest change you've come across in Xining, Qinghai, or the entire China in general, Daniel?
Well, where my home is now, used to be fields.
Mm.
So we've really seen the city develop quite rapidly. It's actually very impressive how fast things have changed and developed here.
Give
Uh,
us a small example.
yeah, I mean, so we moved here. Well, we first visited here more than 10 years ago, and at that time there was a village and some fields and different things, and now there's 28 and 34-story high-rise apartment flats. So that's very, very big change. Also, the part of town where we live now has, since we moved here 8 years ago, there's probably been, 4 to 5 shopping malls that opened in that time. And my hometown is 20,000 people. Okay, so it's kind of like Morgan. We're not, for us. Xining is a very big city. For China, it's a pretty small city. Um,
She's got like 2 million.
yeah,
Yeah.
2 million or so. And so it's really actually convenient in some ways to have a city life, but it is a lot more pressure and a lot more stress. And so being able to get out here to farm and to these more rural areas really is life-giving.
Mm.
You know, one of the beautiful things about Shanghai is the grasslands.
Right.
And these high altitude rolling hills and mountains, this very pastoral scene used to take hours and hours to get there, driving by car. But now with the infrastructure development that's happened these past few years, there's a lot of new highways, bridges and tunnels and really incredible engineering. Uh, and now you can get there in less than half the time that it was in the old days.
Right.
And so that's really been impressive to see.
And Morgan's?
I remember before we moved to China, my wife and I had to wean ourselves off of coffee
Uh,
because you just couldn't get coffee here. Um, but now there's coffee shops on every corner, even in a city like Xining. So that's just an example of how quickly things have changed. And then also online, shopping makes things very convenient for us because it gives us access to products that little comfort things. Cheese, is something that we could never get, in the early days of living here. But now we can very easily order these things on Taobao, and even I remember the first few years trying to find Christmas presents for our kids,
right.
and just the challenge of that. But now with online shopping, there's so much convenience. Now I will say, um, as foreigners, everything moving digitally and to an online presence creates more and more challenges as foreigners because we don't have a shrimp and gin. And most things are set up and you have to have a shrimp and gin.
Right.
So
If only you got just a bank account, I think that'll do, right?
Well, a lot of these apps and different platforms, when they develop them, they develop it for the local people, but not really thinking, oh, foreigners might also need to use this.
So they're just not set up if you don't have a ship and gin. So anyway, something that uh, yeah, creates some challenges.
Right.
More
Hopefully
and
they can
foreigners
make
living
some
here.
improvement there.
Yeah.
And what about rural development? You've been traveling to, or actually, very close to rural areas, right?
Mhm.
And Morgan, you said you're going to go camping somewhere in the wilderness. And what's your observation about
Yeah, I think the development also. I mean, Daniel mentioned the infrastructure, but that's one thing as I've traveled around. I've traveled a lot in Asia, and seeing China has done a very good job of developing infrastructure, roads, highways, bridges, rail lines. So that makes these rural areas much easier to get to, and therefore brings development to those areas. Um, I mean, when we first started farming, we had some greenhouses in a much smaller village,
Right.
and I remember going out there, and you know, I think I mentioned this to the crew actually the other day during lunch. You couldn't get rice. You go to a restaurant, you want rice, didn't have it, only noodles. Whereas now we go to the village where we grow cherries, I can get anything, rice, noodles, um, any kind of food, huoguo. Even the Xi'an,
right?
they have a Xi'an Yanro Palmo restaurant in this little village.
It's hard to explain in English.
A specialty dish from Xi'an
Right.
that, I mean, used to be years ago, you only got that when you went to Xi'an. But now, this little village in Qinghai, you can get that Xi'an specialty,
Right.
no problem. So yeah, even the rural areas, just the speed of the development is quite impressive. Yeah.
Daniel, got anything to add, or we can jump on the next? Okay. So, what would be your um, suggestions for the sustainable development of China's agriculture, organic farming in particular? Daniel?
Yeah, I do see, um, the pattern of development China's taken is very similar to many countries around the world, but I think the difference is a couple things. One is they have the examples of other countries to kind of learn from and improve on. But two is also the pace at which it's happened. And so, we see worldwide these few years this sort of migration to the cities because everybody thinks you have a better life in the cities. But actually, a lot of people get there and they discover maybe it's not as good of a life as I was hoping for. That just the pressures are greater. Maybe you make more money, but your expenses are higher, and so I think one thing that we really want to see happening is that, and I think it is happening, but uh, people put more and more of a value on these rural areas and on agriculture. Just that, if agriculture is almost like the foundation of a civilization, right? If your people don't have food, then your country can't develop and grow. And so it's really a very important um, part of life. And I think a lot of times around the world, farmers get looked down upon as being these kind of uneducated, low class people. But really, they're such a valuable part of society. And so I think for me is just that society as a whole puts more and more value on farmers and on agriculture. I know that's a not exactly your question, but I think that's an important part of the process of seeing sustainable agriculture development. It's just the value of it.
You've answered it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Morgan?
If I can use an example from my country, one thing that happened in the rural development, because America also, had this issue many years ago, a migration of people to urban centers, and then recognizing we need to do something to develop the rural areas. One aspect of that related to agriculture was the universities. Every state there's a university. They call them land grant universities, and they would have um, in rural areas attached to the universities, basically demonstration farms where they would take the research that was being done at the universities and do that in the rural areas. So then the local farmers had access to the best new practices, the best new varieties. So something like that, I think, could be really key to China's rural development related to agriculture, because I do see a big disconnect between, the experts doing the research and then that research actually getting to the farmers that it can influence their practices. So that would be one example. Another thing I think would be more for consumers. I I jokingly am frustrated at times when I see um, oftentimes people are willing to spend a lot of money on the newest cell phone, for example, or the newest purse, but they're not willing to pay just a few more mao for healthy organic produce. And so that I think is something for consumers. Take more interest in where your food comes from. Buy local food, buy directly from farmers, even if it means you're spending a little more money. That will give the farmers the incentive to do organic, to not just use the what's currently being done, because they're trying to increase their yields because the margins are so low. Um,
I think that's becoming a trend, especially
yeah,
among the middle class,
yeah.
especially in cities, right? But
I
you're saying,
think so. Yeah,
mm,
I think so. And one thing we've learned is that we're always thinking of what happens in those first tier cities. Within a few years, that's happening throughout the country. So it is a good trend that we're seeing. Yeah.
so another trend we are observing these years is an increasing number of college graduates taking up farming in rural areas amid the country's rural revitalization drive. Um, drive. What's your evaluation of such a phenomenon, and what would be your advice for them?
Well, I think it's something we see all over the world, actually.
Yeah.
Just kind of people our age and younger uh, wanting to get back to the land, get back to nature.
Yeah.
And honestly, our parents' generation in the States, there was a few people that were really into that, but it's becoming more and more mainstream.
Mm.
And I think what people are realizing is that we don't have to have these large industrial scale farms to make a living. And especially with the organic agriculture, um, you can make a living with a small farm. There's many of people all over the world that have done it with a place even smaller than we have. And maybe they're not doing all the other stuff we are, but it is possible. And so I think, for those people that are interested in agriculture, it doesn't hurt to give it a try, but you also need to have your expectations managed.
Right.
You need to realize that this is not going to be a quick fix, an overnight success. And so it takes a sort of certain, I don't know, personality or character traits or something to be able to stick with it through the challenges and get to the other side and see the successes.
Yeah, we do have this personality like you too, right?
Yeah, perseverance. We
Right.
need a lot of perseverance. I think it's great that trend, and I think that's really what we are anticipating more and more of that, and why we're really trying to develop this model that has a lot of the components that a person would need to be able to do that, where we figured out the pieces that necessary, and someone could come and learn from us, and then be able to take that and um, because I think this model, honestly, I think it will work anywhere in the world, rural, urban, um, high elevation, tropical. I think this will work anywhere in the world. And so that's something that we're very interested in being a part of promoting that through this farm model here. So I think it's great. Yeah, very encouraged by it.
Right. Then looking back, what do you appreciate the most and or regret most so far about living in rural China?
Good question.
It's
Thoughts?
so hard.
I think this isn't necessarily related to rural China, but I think probably one of the I don't think I'm alone in this, but with expats is um, the taking the time to really learn the language well in the early days. Um, that now we're so busy with everything, don't have the opportunity to just stop and do more formal language training.
But you did like you did for 3 years,
I did for 3 years, but you can't learn Chinese in 3 years.
right?
Not with kids, at least.
Yeah, it's challenging with young kids as well. So that would be my greatest regret, um, is maybe doing the language learning a bit differently. Though I'm always learning more and working up here, always improving language. Um, but I think greatest, what I appreciate is the worldview I've been able to give my kids, and the opportunity of growing up here in China, but also being able to travel, and to really understand different cultures, understand why cultures develop certain ways. So yeah, just yeah, very happy that we're able to give my kids that opportunity growing up.
Dang.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, my hometown is a rural area. Most of my relatives were involved in agriculture in one form or another. And so um, one of the things we really love about Xining is even though it's quite an urbanized city, it's very easy to get to the rural areas. Um, the the distance is not that far, within an hour or two you can forget you were ever in a city. And that's one of the things that we really love because we're not city people. It's just the reality of our life, of where we live at this season and time. But really, our enjoyment, our refreshment, our life, it's more about these rural areas. And there's really special places. We haven't seen even probably 1% of the amazing places in this country or even the world. Um, but yeah, we do really enjoy just the chance to learn new things, to meet new people, even with the business, to kind of take the local wisdom and the modern technology and science and put them together. And regrets, yeah, I maybe just would be nice if we could get out more than we do. Out of the city and travel more, see more places. And it's not a regret necessarily, but it's maybe something we'd like to shift a little bit in the future. And I think now that we're kind of coming out of this pandemic season, we'll have more and more opportunities. We've got different people we're connecting with all over the country that are interested in what we're doing. They want to learn more about compost or learn more about regenerative organic agriculture. And so we can sort of mix business with pleasure, go see these new places, but also meet new contacts and promote this farm model or this style of agriculture.
Mm. You talked about some more alternatives. Well, if the return of your plateau organic farming business it still fall short of your expectations in the next, say, 5 years, do you have any other backup plans?
I think whatever we do in the future, it's who can say, you know. But I think we still want to be involved in agriculture at some point. You know, I could see ourselves even in retirement
Yeah.
years down the road, still doing some kind of small farming or different things somewhere in the world. But I think we're pretty confident actually that uh, we're going to see the end result of all of our sweat equity
All right.
bearing a return on investment in the coming years. And I think that's part of what keeps us going too, is knowing that we're not doing this for nothing. And at the very least, you know, people are having a chance to eat food that can help their bodies stay healthy. And that's a return on investment right there.
That's true.
You know, it's not all about the financial side of things. Um, we want to talk about the planet, and we want to talk about people, and we want to talk about profit. Like all these things are important, and we've already started to see, I think, um, those returns happening outside of the profit one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we just listen. There's birds around here that when we started a few years ago, there was not as much wildlife in this little area. And so we're already seeing the planet kind of making progress and being improved, and that's rewarding. Uh, you know, seeing our employees, having kids and building a family, that's rewarding. It's just being part of their process of life. And so, yeah, it's important to make profit, um, but that will come. And in the meantime, we already see a lot of cool things happening.
But in the States, actually, we've seen some, small farms, their living space has been increasingly squeezed. You know. Some even go bankrupt, especially after the 3-year COVID pandemic. So, Morgan, are you worried about a similar scenario in China?
It is true. Over the last several years, farms in America have consolidated more and more. Um, I think what we're doing, this style of farming, those farms are growing all the time because it it gives people a lot more access to agriculture without needing a huge amount of farmland. One thing we say in agriculture, agriculture is a recession-proof industry. The reality is people will always need to eat. And here in China, fresh vegetables are such an important part of the diet. I don't really see demand for fresh produce going down over the next 5 years. Um, so I think we're quite confident that it will continue to grow. And just talking about young people and being more interested in agriculture, I think we're in a good position over the next 5 years. But like Daniel said, we don't necessarily know what it'll look like, but we will be involved in some aspect of this style of farming for the rest of our lives.
But what people can consume like daily is closely related to their income, related to the country's economy. But many people, initially had full confidence, like you just said, in China's economic recovery after the pandemic. It's like home and abroad. You know, and so far this year, do not keep us. So, are you worried about the future?
Economic cycles come and go. It's part of life. And so I think, yeah, we're in a good position of, being able to persevere through challenges. And economic challenges are uh, just a challenge as much as insects and diseases are a challenge. And so it's just another type of challenge. And how are you going to get through it? Um, be creative, think outside the box, adapt to the market. One of the things, it's kind of funny, we get a lot of feedback sometimes about our price points. And a lot of people say your prices are too low. You're not valuing your product enough. And then others say your prices are too high. We can't afford your product. But we really haven't wanted to make our prices too high that they're not affordable for the average person. And so, yeah, I think it's comparable. If somebody goes to a supermarket to buy their vegetables instead of a morning market, the morning market's the cheapest price you can find. Supermarket's probably the most expensive price you can find. I'd say we're competitive in those ranges. So we'll see what happens. But
We do see, I think people maybe were overly optimistic at how fast the economy would come back um, after the last several years. Uh, what I have noticed is people don't eat out as much. People don't like here the price of meat has gone down considerably because there isn't as much demand. People aren't buying things like um, but fresh produce, we've only seen an increase in demand um, for our products because people are becoming more health conscious.
Right.
Yeah, after the pandemic.
And last little bit, maybe something you want to share with your countrymen or other expats living here in China, something or advice or anything you want to share with them?
hmm.
Want to do? You think of any?
Advice for expats living in China.
Or anything or your experience you want to share with them, or probably some something you want to remind them
Uh-huh.
about living in China.
Well,
Anything.
I guess maybe I was in Shanghai recently at a restaurant, and the waiter was actually foreigner, and they were trying to get me to sign up for their reward thing. You put enough money on your account, you get these benefits, all that.
Right.
And I had to tell him 3 or 4 times, I don't live in Shanghai. I just travel here regularly because I don't really think I want to put that much money on anyway. Finally, he was like, "Oh, you don't live in Shanghai?" I've never met an expat that didn't live in Shanghai. Now he hadn't been there very long, but maybe the advice would be to other expats, get out of the big cities. There's a lot of China to experience. Get out to the rural areas. Um, do something creative. Find something, a need that isn't being met there, and try to meet it. There's a lot more of China than just those big first tier cities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Daniel?
Yeah, I think, I've been fortunate to travel around the world a bit, not to hundreds of countries or anything like that, but to several countries. And I just really enjoy learning about new people, new things, new cultures. Even here at the farm, we're always learning, you know. So I think one thing that's important to remember is just to be willing to learn. And one of the things I have learned is that wherever you go in the world, people are still people. Maybe their country is this country, or their culture is that culture, or their language is that language. But at the end of the day, we're all just people, and uh, we should enjoy learning about each other and experiencing each other's lives. I think that brings so much richness to life. Is being willing to kind of look past our own little piece of the world and see what else is out there, to discover and enjoy and to learn from. We don't want to just be like the foreigners saying, "Oh, I know all the best ways to do stuff," but we want to be learning from the local people too. And um, I think there's a lot of value.
Thank you very much for sharing your stories with us, our listeners. Actually, it's quite eye-opening for us over the past few days. Thanks a lot, Daniel and Morgan.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thanks all of you
Yeah,
guys for coming.
With that, we wrap up our chat. Many thanks to Daniel Willers and Morgan Jones for sharing your stories with our listeners. If you have any comments on the topic of this show, please feel free to message us. You can find us on all major podcast platforms or send us an email to radio@cgtn.com. I'm Tuyun. Thank you for being with us. We'll have more chat next week.
This is CGTN Radio. Hear the difference.